Welcome to toy-polloi.
I think I like toy fairs the most because it's just a large volume of toys all in one place. But I don't go to the sort of main toy fairs where it's all sort of sci-fi stuff. I like going to ones that are sort of train and collector fairs because you tend to get a lot better bargains. There's an awful lot of stuff that I'm not interested in, but then there's still stuff that I'll be sort of hunting for. And because the sort of die-cast and train sellers don't sort of know what they're selling for other toy lines, you tend to get better prices. So for me, it has to be toy fairs. I don't think there is. I think toys are there to be played with, and once they're in your collection you can do what you want with them. So if I've got an idea for a custom figure, I'll work on it. If I've got an idea for a custom ship, I will do something to it. The only thing I probably wouldn't do are some really rare toys that I just only have one of and I've never seen others, like my sort of Battlestar Galactica Land Ram. I can see some potential there, and there's certainly some things that you could do to it because it really has a lot of space for adding lights and things, but it's such a rare toy and I've only got the one of them, I just wouldn't do anything to that. I do still watch cartoons. A lot of it's the sort of more adult cartoons like King of the Hill or Tales from the Tour Bus or Family Guy, things like that. But then there are some kids shows I like. I do like the Powerpuff Girls. So I still watch stuff, but not maybe as much as I did a long time ago when I was a child. But there are still cartoons that I do like watching today. I've certainly enjoyed watching the modern Star Wars films, but they're not the same as the old films, and they never will be. That's just not what they do these days. Modern films have a different style and different sort of way of being edited and put together, but they're still enjoyable films. As for the toys, those I'm really not a fan of. I don't think modern toys are a patch on what we had when we grew up. They're just not built very well. They seem to try and squeeze in features to sort of like Nerf guns that just really don't work with the toy lines, and I just don't think they're made very well. The quality of them is terrible. Every modern toy I've bought sort of since the 2000s has broken in some way, or even been broken as soon as I got it out of the packet, and that just isn't a good toy. And it's such a shame. They could really make toys to be played with. But I also think that kids these days don't really play with toys the way that we did when we were growing up in the sort of 70s and 80s. Modern kids have so much more things to do and things to play with, and toys just aren't part of their lifestyle. So it's a shame. I don't think we'll ever get back to the heyday. I think the heyday was when I was growing up, 70s and 80s, and that's just the way it is. Toys are never going to be as good as they were when we had them. As a child, I used to make lots of things because there just weren't toys for the programs I was watching. So I'd make little felt versions of figures or stuff out of Fimo, mainly because either I couldn't find a toy or I couldn't afford to get a toy from that show, so I would just make it. These days, of course, there are toys made for pretty much everything, so I don't really bother these days. I like to sort of customise things to make them better than they would have been originally, but I don't tend to make things from scratch. Of the toys I collect, I think it's probably Fisher-Price Adventure People that's the most underrated. You see a few people collecting them, but it's not really a sought-after toy line. And the toys are great. The figures are really nicely made, very sturdy. And if you collect them on card, the artwork on the cards is lovely, full of detail and full of sort of bright images. And they're worth collecting on their own. So that's probably the most underrated toy line that I collect. I'm sure there are many others, but for me, that's the one I'd never see people collecting. I think it's possibly myself and one or two others that collect it. So that's the underrated line I would suggest people take a look at. A fix that I do want to cover at some point, which I sort of haven't looked into really, is the Battle Armour He-Man with the rotating chest piece. I've seen some videos on YouTube of people sort of showing how to fix it, but not really, and that's one that I want to work on and actually find a proper fix for, because the videos I've seen just don't really show a good way of doing it. So that's one that eludes me for now, but I will get onto it, and I'm sure there'll be an answer to how to get that thing working again, because it seems so simple, but it's just complicated to get apart. There are two clear figures that I thought as a child should have been in the line. That's the Rebel Fleet Trooper, because that plays quite a big part right at the beginning of Star Wars, and they never made a figure for it. And also Grand Moff Tarkin. It seems strange that they never made a figure of him, because he'd play such a pivotal role in the first Star Wars films. Empire and Jedi, they did seem to make most figures in those lines, or most important figures, so those are really sort of very well covered. It's the Star Wars The New Hope film that they seem to miss out just two sort of very key things. So those are the ones that I would have hoped sort of Kenner would have made, and I know people have made customs of them in sort of recent years, but I don't think they've got the style quite right, and I don't think they can get the style quite right, because you can't sort of think back to what they would have done in those times and get it perfect. So those are the two figures I would have hoped that Kenner would have made at the time, but they never did. My very first Star Wars figures were actually Ben, Luke and Darth Vader. I can't remember who bought them for me. It must have been a Christmas present or something like that, but I clearly remember having those three figures first. Then after that it all got a blur as I just sort of got other ones in, but those three were the first figures I definitely had in my collection.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.